Good morning. It's been a while that I've actually not been able to sleep throughout the night. A while ago, a friend of mine told me that I was line chasing, meaning that I had ideas in my head that, business ideas or things I wanted to do in life that kept me up chasing the line. I'm not sure if that's the case now or just got things on my mind, but either way, it's about 4 something going on 5 a.m. But again, just wanted to peel back the layers in my childhood and how I was able to find my confidence and my voice much later on in life. So, give you a little backstory. My parents divorced. They were only married for about 7 years throughout their marriage. Um, I was born maybe the last three, 2 to 3 years of that marriage, that 7 year marriage. Um, so pretty much after I was born, I don't remember my mom or dad being together because again I was that much younger. But I do remember being much older and my mother and I living together, only me and my mother. And then some nights I'll be at my grandmother's. She'll put me to sleep there, and before she went out, and then my aunts would take care of me throughout the night or the next day, whatever the case is. So that's pretty much how life was. It was me, my mom. We had our own place, and then weekends I would spend the time with my aunts and my grandma because my mom would be out. But during that time, she met this gentleman. Again, the gentleman that would later become my stepfather, stepdad, stepfather, however you want to call it. Again, living in Newport News wasn't the best area, but again, being so young, um, not really being exposed to a lot of things. The one thing I was exposed to was the hood, the projects. We lived in a place where it was like maybe 17 floors in our apartment building. Every time it rained, we had to put towels in every window because it seemed like as if we had the windows open. Right across the street was a housing projects. I remember being dropped off over there before daycare some mornings because that's where the daycare bus driver or the daycare worker lived. And so my mom had to be to work much earlier. And so I would get dropped off over there at times. Luckily, that worked out. So it was a bunch of times where, the gentleman that would end up becoming my stepfather ended up coming over to our apartment, hanging out, what most dudes do when they're trying to holler at a female, even though she may have a kid. But I remember specifically one time, he had been coming around for a while now. And I do remember asking, just being so elated that I'm thinking, like, this is my new dad. And I remember asking, can I call you dad? And I think he may have hinted towards something like, yeah, sure. But again, that's just a dude trying to, do what he do. I'm not knocking nobody, trust me. But it is what it is. But yeah, those were the moments that I remember before we moved up to um, Springfield, Springfield, Virginia, Fairfax County. So a lot of the times, growing up, I just wanted to be a son to a man. I don't remember my dad being in the picture. Again, my dad would tell me, do you remember the apartment? We had the lake in the back, the boat ramp. I don't remember none of that. None of it. So again, I knew the dynamic of a man and a woman being the mother and the father. I knew that dynamic, but I was missing the male part, the father part. So that's why, as a child, young child, I reached out, even though my father was around, sort of. He was around more consistent, so that was the foundation. I was being a sponge at that point. Um, Again, just wanted to be a son to a man. Eventually, um, he moved on to Northern Virginia, Springfield. My mother soon followed after. I don't know how that came about. I just know that we were gone. In the time that they were dating, my brother was born. Um, so you got my mother, me, and then his son, my brother, and we trekked on up from Newport News to Springfield. Start school, kindergarten, um, you know, but we moved into a nice, humble apartment. You know, my mom wasn't working then because she just had my brother, so she wasn't working. So she was able to find a job. But we had an apartment. For years, that apartment was the place of many difficult nights, difficult mornings. Um, just the abuse, the words being heard, certain moments, um, just the actions, and then the makeup. You know, um, just tough as a kid having to hear those things and the arguments, the words being said towards my mother, the way she was being treated, how I was being treated even at a young age. Um, it was challenging. It was challenging at times. Very challenging. Very challenging. But one thing was for sure, every summer, even starting the kindergarten, um, from about kindergarten to fourth grade, I was always going back to Newport News to visit my grandmother, my father, and my aunts and everything. Me and my brother, we stayed at my grandma's. Actually, all the grandkids stayed at my grandma's. So those were some of the best summers because I got to see my cousins from Illinois, my cousins that were down in Newport News, me and my brother, um, my cousins that were over in Hampton. It was just a good time. So summers were always good, and then going back home, it was kind of nostalgia because I forget what detergent my grandma used, or whoever was washing clothes, one of my aunts. I would always go back home and smell my clothes, like literally just smell my clothes until the detergent smell went away because it just reminded me of being away from the BS and the drama of being home in Springfield. Because I knew what came with that was my stepdad, the arguments, the stress, the BS. So having that for about maybe a week kind of gave me like a comfort feeling because I knew that was a piece of me that was peaceful at my grandmother's. Had fun because all my cousins were in town, so we had fun. So summers were always in bad news, Newport News, but those were some good times. So yeah, from kindergarten to fourth grade, we lived in Springfield in this apartment. A lot of stress. Um, yeah, that was just the nature of it. And I remember one time seeing a flyer in elementary school. It was like SYC basketball, Springfield Youth Club basketball. And I brought it home, showed my mother. We talked about it, signed me up for basketball. That was my first introduction to sports. The one thing is, how to get to practice. Didn't know my stepdad was going to be such a jackhole and not allow my mother to use the car. He had a vehicle, he had a state vehicle, because again, he represented Virginia State Police. So he had three vehicles actually, one for my mother, him, his own personal, and then he had the cruiser. Little did I know that this gentleman was a stickler for miles on a vehicle. So it was at times where my mother would literally either we would have to catch the bus, do a little bit of walking, and then I'd arrive at practice. Sometimes we'd be able to catch the bus home depending on what time practice let out, and then we do a little bit of walking, or just be walking a path along certain roads in the dark or before it got dark, before we got to the main road for where practice was to get home. Um, just remembering those moments. My mother she was down for the cause. She was doing what she had to do to get her son to something that he wanted to pursue, regardless of what he held back. You know, don't drive my car, don't put no miles in my car. Um, you know, the mileage thing did carry with me for a number of years when I was fortunate enough to get my own vehicle. Um, but yeah, those were the times when, you know, I remember shortly after being born, being in our own apartment in Newport News, and then moving up to Springfield. So again, just experiencing those trauma moments where, you know, as a kid, you're soaking in all this stuff. You know, you're soaking in the words, the movements, the beatings, the everything. You're soaking it all in, and it's like, is this how life is supposed to be? Is this what I'm not supposed to do? Is this what I'm not supposed to do? Because this doesn't feel good. What I'm hearing, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't sound right. But it is what it is. So I endured that for a long time, from kindergarten to fourth grade. That was in the apartment in Springfield. That was before the move. So, but again, that kept me going to the next summer, or actually the next holiday, Thanksgiving and Christmas. Those were always good holidays as well, because I got to come away from the BS and the stress and come down to Hampton and Newport News, see my dad, my grandma, my other cousins on my dad's side. I still come in contact with them, a few of them, maybe like two or three. Still to this day, it's only two or three of us on my dad's side that we still keep in contact with, cousin wise. Shout out to them. But yeah, that's how it was.